This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Office Talk. Now that we're in the new season of the show, I took a step back and thought about, what is this show all about? What kind of content do I want to create moving forward? And I looked at the description of the show and it says that it's interviews about designing a business and life on your terms. And so I thought, okay, well, who can we bring on the show who can really speak to that? And I thought Mel Abraham was the guy. So if you don't know Mel, he has been in business for, I think, about 3 decades. So he has not only a breadth of experience, but he also has quite a perspective about how to design a business in a way that fits into your life and your values. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the hustle of everything that sometimes we forget why we're doing all of this and what the purpose is. And I think you're really going to enjoy today's conversation that I have with Mel. Now, there are so many directions that I wanted to take this conversation in, and you'll hear me a few times in the episode say, Mel, we got to have you back. Because although we focus mostly on talking about how to value ourselves, how to design a business in a way that is meaningful, that helps to serve others, kind of some of the softer skills, so to speak, he has a wealth of knowledge about how to structure your content, how to deliver content in a way that will resonate with your audience. So if you are a content creator, if you are someone who wants to be an expert in your field, or you are an expert in your field and you want to learn how to market that, he also has some amazing resources on his website that can help you with that. Until we have a chance to record that sequel episode, make sure to head on over to his website at melabraham.com to learn more about him. Mel is also the founder of Business Breakthrough Academy and Thoughtpreneur Academy, and he's also the author of the #1 national bestseller, The Entrepreneur Solution. So I'm going to link up to all of those resources in the show notes. Now, just a little thing about the tech side of this episode. It may not be the best sound quality because I was recording it while sitting on the floor at my neighbor's house while we were in the process of moving. So apologies for that in advance, but you know what? Hey, you got to roll with it, right? When you're an entrepreneur. But that doesn't take away from the amazing conversation we had. So with that said, let's go to the show. Hey, Mel, thank you so much for being with me today.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me in it.
I am so excited to talk to you because I think you are just full of so much knowledge to the point that I was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about because there's so many things we can talk about. So why don't we bring our listeners up to speed about who you are, what you do, and what brought you to what you do today?
Cool. So, one, I'm a CPA by education, so hopefully they don't hold that against me. Because my son thinks that CPA stands for cheapest person around. But the reality is that I've spent the last, 3 decades or so figuring out how do you build businesses. Not only how do you build businesses, but do it in a way that allows you to live a life that gives you the flexibility. I did it because I had to do it because I was a single full-time dad. I had to figure out how do you do this in that way. And a lot of the stuff that I've done is really in the expert space, the wisdom space, people that have knowledge and solutions that they want to get out in the world and serve people to get them to success or to solve their problems a little faster. And it's been a journey. It's not been a straight line. There's been a lot of hiccups along the road, but I think that's where we find all the lessons and the learnings. And along the way, I wrote a book called The Entrepreneur Solution, which we hit #1 on Barnes & Noble, USA Today bestseller. We moved 16,000 books in about 2.5 weeks.
Wow. That's a lot. That's
a
lot of books. Yeah. And so having worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you've worked with entrepreneurs at so many different levels, I know you sit on different boards of different companies, as well as working one-on-one, with, entrepreneurs like myself who are, basically one-woman shops. What are some of the biggest struggles that you see entrepreneurs facing when it comes to designing a business that's not wearing them down? Do you know what I mean?
It's such a huge question that most of us don't even think about it. I mean, most entrepreneurs, what happens is that we either become necessity entrepreneurs because we got pushed out and we get into a place and we say, I just got to go do this. Or we're what I call idea entrepreneurs, that we got this great idea, we take a bunch of caffeine and we go running into the walls. And we don't know what we don't know. And I think one of the biggest obstacles is that we don't get clear on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the values we bring to the table. In other words, it's easy to figure out. Now, some people may argue with this, but it's easy to figure out the mechanics of business, of understanding, okay, what's my business model and how do I make money and who's my market? I mean, that's the mechanics. That's the how of business. And we can get all of that stuff dialed in and we can outsource it and we get advisors. But if we don't do that under the umbrella of what I call meaning, in other words, why are we doing it? We're going to make good decisions and bad life decisions. And I think so one of the first things we need to do is get clear on why we're in this game or why we want to travel this road. And does that serve our life? Like I said, when I first started doing this and building my practice, I was a single full-time dad, and I thought I was doing the right thing because I was building a business that was starting to get momentum. We were getting cash flow. We were growing it well into the six figures. And, lo and behold, a 6-year-old boy just slaps me in the face and draws a picture of me staring. This is the picture that he had of his dad. And I was sitting there in front of 2 computer screens with a phone at each ear and the one on the desk ringing. And I realized that although my mechanics were right, my meaning was wrong, and I had to rejigger and say, how do I reformat this business to serve life and not just business?
So tell me, what was your journey to figuring that out? Because I feel like a lot of people who I interact with, they start off because they have a passion, or maybe it's a way for them to leave that corporate 9 to 5. They have some skill set, and, life has changed. It's become so much easier to start a business. And so they go into it with high hopes, and then they're working 24/7. There isn't much left at the end of the month for them to pay themselves properly. I mean, how do you go about architecting this business to not only be work, but also to fit within your life in terms of to complement your life and your lifestyle that you want that feels fulfilling as well?
I think one of the real key elements is to be really specific and deliberate about what you do. Sometimes we don't take the time at the beginning to start to define what's really important to us. What are the obstacles or the things that I'm absolutely not going to give up? And I realized that I was given a gift of fatherhood, to be a father to Jeremy, and that had to take priority. And one of the challenges is that we get this concept thrown at us, you got to get balance in life. Well, that gives the impression that what I'm trying to do is get equal weight in different places. I don't think there's a concept called work-life balance. I think that that's a myth. We've been sold a myth. The fact of the matter is that every choice we make in business is a life choice. It affects lives, and therefore we need to look at it through that lens. And work-life balance, if I were to interpret it, is about being intentional with the weight you give certain things. So one of the challenges, especially as an entrepreneur, is getting clarity on where you want to go, why you want to do it, and the specific things that will move the needle for you. And anything that is outside that realm, you're just going to have to let go.
Yeah.
And be almost dogmatic about it because you're protecting your life. It's really interesting to me. We get all caught up in money. We get caught up in, how much is this going to cost, and we're going to negotiate the money part of it and this and that. Bottom line is that actually we can always make money. We seem to not be so dogmatic about negotiating with our time.
Yeah.
That's the one thing we can't get back.
Yeah, and our energy. Sometimes it's like managing your time and your energy. They're like somewhat limited resources, right? And being very aware of how you spend your energy and spend your time. And, one of the things that I see a lot of people struggle with, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. One of the things that I see people struggle with is how when we talk about valuing your time, also, I'm having a hard time articulating it, but I see so many people undercharging for their services, undercharging, just having this money mindset that they're not worth it, or this isn't, I'm having a hard time.
I know.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I love this question, because I came from that CPA world where we swap hours for dollars.
Yeah.
You were in that world also. And it is the worst, most awful kind of should be burned at the stake business model that's out there.
Right? Every 6 minutes had to be billed.
Yes.
Did you do the same thing as a CPA, or?
Yes. and it was all about, billable hours and realization and all that stuff. And what we did is we really commoditized what we do.
Yeah.
And I was, when I first started out, I was doing a lot of valuations and valuing businesses and building businesses. Fact of the matter is, you don't reduce that to an hourly rate. And when we start to have a challenge with trying to value our time, value what we have, the issue is that we're thinking in commodity thinking. And what we need to consider is this, and I'll give you an example to land this, is we need to think in transformational thinking. And that may seem woo-woo, but let me explain. So I get a phone call from an attorney, and I've done a lot of negotiation with the IRS, against the IRS, and doing some things like that. Get a phone call from an attorney who they're staring at a $5 million tax bill. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the valuation, and if I do this and we are successful at it, that $5 million goes to $500,000. And maybe that takes 10 hours of time. And let's say that my billable rate is whatever, $1,000. That's $10,000. But what did I give them? I gave them a $4.5 million solution, a $4.5 million transformation. We need to start thinking not about just our time, but the transformation we create during that time, and come from a value perspective. So instead of thinking in the context of price and cost, thinking in the context of what's the value I'm giving up and what's the value they're going to get, and do the transaction on that basis and remove the mathematics of hours and time and all of that. Because quite frankly, if I'm in a ton of pain and this person in 1 minute can get me out of pain, it's actually even more valuable than the person that's going to take 6 months to get me out of pain. I'm going to pay them a whole lot more. Yeah. And yet we want to reduce that and say, well, it only took you 1 minute, so I'm going to pay you less.
Yeah, there's this great story. I don't know how true it is, and I'm probably going to mess it up a little bit, but there's this story about how Pablo Picasso was sitting in a French cafe, and a mother comes to him and says, "Oh, I see you're Pablo Picasso. Can you please sketch a sketch of my daughter?" And so, it takes him like 2 minutes to sketch something, and then he says, well, it's going to be some price that she thought was ridiculous for the amount of time that he spent. So she says to him, but that only took you 5 minutes. And he was like, no, this took me 40 years, right? That it was 40 years of my experience that allows me to create this piece of art in 5 minutes. And so it's kind of that similar concept of, well, what is that value that I'm bringing to you regardless of the commodity of how long it takes me? And what is that transformation that I'm creating or that I'm receiving? Because I think sometimes we're so focused on the dollars and the money, because especially as we're first starting out, we have such limited resources that we forget that when we make an investment in our business, we don't look at it sometimes with, well, what is the transformation that I'm getting when I invest in this software, or I invest in this training, or I hire this person. And I think that's the change that I would like to see more people awakening to, because I see so many people struggling, myself included, with this concept.
See, this kind of came home to me. You're so on point, and I've heard the Pablo Picasso story. I love it. It's, we all bring a lifetime of experience with us when we come to any kind of game, any kind of relationship, anything. But I remember one time I was in a meeting where I was meeting with a client, and it was being introduced to the client by an attorney. And when it came down to the discussion of fees, I hemmed and hawed. And the client left, and the attorney looked at me, and he was one of the top attorneys in Beverly Hills, and he said, if you ever hem and haw about your value and your fees, again, I will never bring you another client. He says, you need to get comfortable. And this goes to a framework that I use, but you got to get comfortable with the transformation, the knowledge, the wisdom, the expertise that you bring to the table. And I've said this from the stage many times where I'll tell an audience, I actually don't care whether you buy from me or not. Mm-hmm. The most important thing is that you make a logical, certain, and informed choice. And here's what my value is, and stand in what we call conviction. And instead of convincing someone, so that's convincing selling, I want to be in the case of conviction selling. So here's what I have. Here's what it can do for you. Here's how your life will be different. If there's a match, let's jump on the journey. If you have questions, let's talk about it. But I in no way want to twist your arm, manipulate, or convince you of anything. I simply want you to make the right choice for you at this time. And stand in the conviction of what you offer and own that. And I think that's something that we are often, including myself at times, you struggle with that and you go, oh, should I build this or should I do that? No, stand in the conviction of what you bring to the table and own that from that time forward, and the right people will come. There's going to be people that don't want to work with you, and that's okay. We don't want to work with everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that there was a framework that you follow. Is that something that you could share with us?
Well, the idea is this concept of sales, where historically what ended up happening is that a sale, way back when, it was this kind of manipulative, if I can be kind of clever enough, I can get someone to buy from me, which didn't leave people feeling very good in the process. And so we needed to think differently. Well, then we transitioned from that to this space of maybe more relationship selling. So if they liked me, they would buy from me.
Yeah.
But that wasn't enough, because if they like me but they didn't get the results I want, that doesn't work. So we transitioned to this next stage, the third stage, which is really about consultative selling, where if I ask enough questions, they'll understand that I understand them, they'll buy from me. Now, the challenge with that, when we approach the sales aspect with any of those, we're still trying to push our customers in the door. Mm-hmm. But when we cross the line and we jump above that, where we do what I call conviction selling, and the one other piece that I think is missing above that, where we say, here's what I have, it solves these problems, and this is really big in the expertise space, in the thought leader space, in the influencer space. Here's the expertise I have. Here's the problems it solves. Here's the results we get. If it fits, come along. That's the space that I think we need to start at, and forget all the manipulative kinds of jargon and language. Yeah, language is important, but if it's coming from the perspective of manipulating them and convincing them to buy something that maybe they don't need, is totally inappropriate. I was speaking in Australia, and the promoter came to me and says, we're going to have our sales team out there, so when you get done with your speech, they'll be there to handle the sales. And I said, what's the sales team do? He says, we're there to close people. And I said, absolutely not. Send them home. And he says, what do you mean? I said, we don't need to close people. We need to serve people. And if they're in the game to close people, get them out of here and give me people that will serve people. And if they need it, if they see the need, they will buy. But I am not closing people. And the difference there is this last piece, which I think is missing, especially when we talk about technology today. And that is, I want to stand in conviction, but I want to come from a place of connection.
Okay.
And what we've done is we've confused likes, we've confused contacts with connection. Our audience, our marketplace, want to feel connected with us. They want to feel that you understand them. And so what we need to do is, when we create a sales process or when we create a communication process, in that process, when we come from a place of conviction of what we can offer, the transformation, the value we provide, now we can just simply focus on how do I connect with them, viscerally, emotionally, where they're at so they feel cared about, they feel served, and they do. It's as easy as this. One of the things that I just started doing recently is when someone buys from me online, literally they get a really short, really quick personal video message from me. I just grab my phone and I say, hey there, Annette, it's great to have you. Thank you for jumping in and trusting in me, and I look forward to serving you. If you have questions, if you have any challenges coming up or anything, just let me know, and I'll make sure that I'm there for you. But thank you for jumping on board, and I look forward to seeing the great things come out of you.
Do you do this for all of your customers?
I do it for all of them.
Oh, my goodness. Talk about surprise and delight.
Oh, my God. They're freaked out, but freaked out in a good way. And, buyer's remorse, all that stuff goes out the window. And now they go, he's human.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long. I just pick up the phone and do it and hit send.
That's amazing. Because I know you're a very, very busy person. And the fact that you take the time to add that personal touch to me is astounding. I don't know. Wow. That's impressive. But I could see that. That to me would as a consumer or as a client just make me feel like, wow, this person, it sets you apart. It differentiates you, and it makes me feel like I know I have a connection with this person immediately, even though it's through video or whatnot. That's amazing. So what are some other ways, because we have become such a fast-paced technology, it does feel sometimes like the struggle that I have with social media. I remember a world without social media and email, right? Remember those were the good old days when you could actually call somebody and the answering machine would go off and you could actually screen somebody's message, just no caller ID, none of that stuff. And
people are going to be asking, what's an answering machine?
What's an answering machine? Yeah, and pagers, and we had like little codes so people knew who it was. And anyway, so I remember a world, and so none of this existed. And so for me, what I've always struggled with, and when I talk to other folks who are kind of in my generation, I don't get social media because one-on-one, I feel like I can create that connection, but on a platform like social media or email, maybe it's a little different. I feel uncomfortable because I don't have that data from that other person, the body language, that, eye contact. What are some ways that you're seeing, or how can we go about creating that connection that you talk about in light of the fact that we do live in this electronic age nowadays, and that's most communication is done, through text message and Instagram stories and things like that.
Yeah, and those obviously can be misconstrued or censored.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you heard? I remember when I first met my wife and I was flying. I had just finished speaking in Northern Cal, and I was flying. She was on the East Coast. I was flying to meet her on the East Coast. I was in the taxi cab. We're texting back and forth, and all of a sudden I could see the tension raising because the tonality, she didn't understand the text, and she took it wrong. And so I said, pick up the phone. And so I picked up the phone and called her, and I hate to say, what's the best way, but this is why I'm doing video a little bit, is I love video because they get a chance to see you. But if you want the human touch, we can't substitute it with the technology. And that becomes a challenge. And so often that I see people that are so locked in, well, I'll just do it via email. Now, sometimes if we see a point like our customer service, there's a certain level that they'll answer, they'll respond, and this and that. But they've been instructed that if there's a question that comes up, or if it raises that maybe they're not getting it or they're not understanding, I said, pass it to me. Because I have no problem picking up the phone and talking to the very people that I'm trying to serve and the very people that are, in fact, paying my bills and giving me the life that I want to lead. And for me, if I'm here to provide, to teach people how to be influencers, how to be thought leaders, how to be entrepreneurs, and live the life they want, then if I'm not being true to that word, I can't do it. So for me, there's a couple things that I would do. One is be old-fashioned every once in a while and just pick up the phone. There's so many times that I just pick up the phone and call. Now, maybe you don't want to pick up the phone and say, I don't want them to have my personal number. That's fine. in Facebook, in Messenger, I've done this plenty of times. You can hit call and you can run a call through Messenger. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've done this plenty of times and they go, oh my God, Mel's calling. He's, and I don't think that it's that big of a deal that I'm calling, but to them it means a lot. But to me, like you're saying, now all of a sudden the tonality, the passion, they get it and you get it back from them. So I still go back to a phone call. I have repeatedly now send video messages to people just on a whim. And if they can deal with the fact that I might have just got out of the water or I may be in a coffee house and it may be noisy and they don't want to be critical about it. It's not production quality, but it's real. And I just, in this moment, I had a friend just before we got on this that I reached out to him and say, hey, how's it going? Need anything, any support? And he just let me know that he was dealing with a health issue. Mm-hmm. So before we got on this call, I shot a really quick video and saying, hey man, if there's I'm getting on an interview, but if there's anything you need, I understand you're dealing with a health issue. You don't have to tell me what it is, but if there's anything you need, reach out to me. Yeah. I know that I'm here. Yeah. And putting that in an email, putting that in a text to me is like, okay, it's just lip service. But when you shoot the video and they see it in your face, and they see the caring, then I think it means something to them. And to kind of rehumanize the relationship becomes important. Social media, believe it or not, I think has desocialized us. When you look at Stephanie and I were sitting home one Friday night, and because we have such a wonderful social life, we were sitting there saying, what's this Snapchat thing about? Or the Periscope. It was Periscope. What's Periscope? So we decided to get on Periscope and watch Periscopes. This was our Friday night. And there's this woman on there that we don't even know, and she's out there talking, and then you see the trolls. Yeah. And they start making comments about her body, about these things. And I go, at what point did we as a society decide that it was okay to say things through technology that we wouldn't have the guts, the nerve, or the disrespect to do it in their face?
Yeah, and I think I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm always shocked at just how much online bullying is such an issue, for kids these days. I mean, I guess in comparison, my childhood was so different. If you're going to bully someone, you just bullied them on the playground, and it wasn't this. It's a whole other conversation, but. I think that's what holds a lot of people back from really putting themselves out there and being vulnerable and creating that connection and that conviction is because of that. And so what are some things that, I guess, like, how can people, I don't want to say practice, but get themselves to a point where despite that, because that's gonna come, all of that's there. So despite that potential negativity, potential rejection, the potential embarrassments and flops, people can work on that kind of that conviction that you're talking about, their passion for what they're creating and selling or serving, their service or their offering.
You're right. I mean, once you start putting yourself out there, the haters will come.
The hater's gonna hate, as the wise Taylor Swift has once said.
And I think that for me, this was initially a struggle. So my book, The Entrepreneur Solution, was originally written and finished between 2009 and 2010. It got redone, but it got delayed, and I didn't put it out until 2015. And the reason I didn't put it out until 2015 really was there was a lot of me in the book. And I said, oh my God, I'm going to put myself out there, and then what's going to happen? Yeah. And so I held on to it, and it wasn't until a very good friend, colleague, mentor gave me a loving kick in the behind and said, I will not support you, I will not promote you, I will not put you on my stage, I will not do anything for you until you put this book out there. Mm-hmm. And by putting this book out there, I know that we've served over 16,000 souls with it, assuming that they read it. And the fact is that I keep saying to myself, the thing that I keep saying to myself and I tell the people that I work with is that it is more important for us to be so attached to our mission and our purpose and the desire to serve that we are driven more by the desire to serve and make a difference than the internal dialogue that we may be telling ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I constantly have to deal with that, because the fact is that if you put yourself out there, it's going to happen. There's no way to stop it. And, there's plenty of times that I'll block people, I'll delete people. Listen, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I'm okay with opinions, and I'll leave those fine. But when you become disrespectful, when you become crude or rude, then I don't have time for it, and I'm going to block you and delete you. So it's one of those things that we got to attach ourselves to the outcome we're trying to get to, the mission we're trying to go through, and say that mission is what's going to get me through these times. That's one. Two, people such as yourself. I mean, you're doing such an amazing job and a service to give people a place to congregate, give people a place to be, to realize that they're not alone. There are folks that are going through the same things, and you can, I guess it's misery loves company or what have you, but we get a chance to be able to have a dialogue with people on the same, what I call the same journey, but different paths.
Yeah.
And we can have conversations and we can support each other in the process. And you provide that partly with the podcast and the things that you do. And then the third thing is really creating proximity. I know that you're in certain masterminds and coaching groups. I am too. And to have a core group of people that are at different levels, in the sense that they're not just people in your life that are always going to say yes and tell you what you want to hear, because that doesn't serve us either. But a group of people that know what your journey is, they want to support you in your journey, they're willing to do what it takes, and they're willing to pick you up and dust you off, but at the same time kick you in the behind if you need it. So I know that I have a core group of people that when things like that happen, where I get just absolutely lambasted or something that really hurts or hits me deep, and because, listen, I'm human too, so I read the stuff and it comes in, or I get the email and everything, and I need to go to them and say, can you help me put this in perspective? How should I handle it? What do I need to do? I don't have all those answers at times, because we get emotionally entrenched and involved in it, and they come to me just the same. And so I think we need to surround ourselves with places we can go, people we can lean on, and a purpose that can drive us to really sustain ourselves through it.
Yeah, and, just to piggyback off of that is, I have been, the people who from the outside you perceive to be quote unquote successful, whatever that means for you, when you actually, get to know them, you realize everybody feels the same way, and they continue to have their own, fears or insecurities or whatever. It's just they have learned to bounce back from them a lot faster. So, yeah, they might have maybe a launch that was disappointing to them, or they maybe have something that they perceive to be not successful or didn't meet their expectations. But the way that they bounce back from that, the way they frame that experience, I think is the key. Is, they frame it as, a learning opportunity, or they don't sit in the misery. They kind of just pay a quick visit and then they move on. And so that's always has been refreshing for me to realize that everybody goes through this. Everybody, even the quote unquote successful people, have these concerns. Yeah.
Our good friend James Wetmore said, "New level, new devil." Yeah. It doesn't matter where you're at. I mean, it's really easy to look at people and go, "Oh, I bet their life's really it's like, tulips and roses and
unicorns."
Yeah. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You're so right. A number of years ago, 2005, I literally had 1/3 of my net worth wiped out by a Ponzi scheme. I mean, everything I owned, 1/3 of it was gone. There was three people that I knew. There was more in it, but between the three of us, we lost $4.5 million.
Oh my God, that's got to hurt.
Oh my God, it left a mark. Now, here's the interesting thing. You talk about this and of how we deal with it. There was three of us in there. One of them just reduced his lifestyle because he had been retired. So he said, "I'm just going to reduce my lifestyle, and it is what it is, and I'm just going to continue to live." So that's what he did. The other one got so bitter, so resentful that he destroyed his marriage, he destroyed his business, and he almost destroyed his liver. Now he's on the mend. So, he stopped drinking and he's on the mends. Mm-hmm. And then there was me. I was driven by the fact that I was raising Jeremy at the time. And I sat back and I had to say, I can allow this to get me to shrink into a corner, or I can allow this to give me the opportunity to teach him something. So I sat him down. I said, listen, dude, yeah, this hurts, but we're not in the street. We're not going to lose our house. And I had the skills to rebuild. And so literally from that moment forward, 18 months later, not only did we recover the amount that was lost, which was 7 figures, but we recovered it by 3 times because of the skills, because of the posture. So here's 3 people in the same situation, and they chose 3 different ways to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I guess we get to choose our response.
Yeah. Yeah, and so much of it is that it's the mental, where you are, your mindset, as they say. It sounds a little cliche, but it's so true of like building that muscle, and that skill of that, basically reframing your mental operating system, right?
Yeah.
To reprogramming it so that it tells you different things. So when you put input in it, whether it's, we just lost $4.5 million due to a Ponzi scheme, to whatever, it just kind of reboots and it goes back to, standard operating procedures here where, okay, well, what do we do now? How do we move on from this? And I think that's the one lesson that whoever you talk to who's been through this entrepreneurial journey, it all comes back to that, is how can you develop that mental strength, or I don't know what you would call it, but that
it's a level of resilience and persistence.
Yeah. And I think some people are born with it. My husband is quite a persistent and resilient person, whereas I think the rest of us have to work at it to reprogram ourselves a little bit. But I'm confident that this conversation is going to inspire people. It's going to make people feel they're not alone. Hearing your story and what you've gone through at many different levels in your career, it seems like you are kind of the king of just bouncing back from something, and, that it can be done, I think is going to be very comforting, but also inspiring to people too, that regardless of where you are on your journey, you can overcome it. So whether right now you're sitting and you haven't started your business and you're feeling like, how am I going to do this? I don't maybe have the support from my family to leave my job, but I really believe in this. Or maybe you've been at it for a while and you're feeling like you're not as quote unquote successful as you'd like to be. Hopefully this conversation has rebooted them as well. So Mel, with that said, I wanted to wrap up this conversation. I feel like we barely, just like hit the surface. I would love to have you back on because I know there's so many other things that we could talk about, and we've kind of touched upon some of the other stuff offline, but I would love.
Tell me when, and I'll make sure we make it happen.
Thank you, Mel. But before we sign off, I always like to end my episodes by asking the guest to fill in the following blank, which is the one thing I know for sure is, and you fill in the blank.
Wow. The one thing I know for sure is God, this thing just keeps coming to me, that nothing that I do is terminal. This is in light of the mistakes that the conversation we had, is that just keep trying, just keep going. That what we do is, look, I survived doing a webinar with a shirt off.
Oh, you have to tell the story. Tell the story. Tell the story.
Here I am, first time that I'm doing a webinar where I'm not only the talent, I'm the tech. So I'm trying to run everything and do everything at the same time. It's a morning webinar. And so I roll out of bed. It's a 9 o'clock webinar. I roll out of bed. I'm wearing my Superman pajama bottoms. I got no shirt on. I figured, but I'm doing it for an organization that gave me the Lifetime Achievement Award. So there's 250 people on the line that know me.
Oh my God.
And I strap in, I put my headphones on, I start the webinar, and I'm trying to run the tech, and I'm doing the slides, and I'm talking, and about a minute into it, I look at the chat room, and it says, there's people saying, Mel's naked. He's not wearing a shirt. And like I look up, and the green light on my webcam is on, and I'm like, oh God, I can't get away. And so it was like, and first off, my wife never let me live it down, but here's the thing of this. So I was able to get a Post-it note on the webcam and turn off the peep show. But the reality is that I was doing this training, and at the end of the training, I was offering an additional training. here I was, where you would think this is one of the worst things that could happen on a webinar. And at the end of that, literally sold $30,000 of training to these folks. So
that's crazy.
If I can survive that and now laugh about it and tell a story about it, then that's what we're really dealing with. I think that nothing is really terminal. So I have a friend of mine that used to ask me this. He says, if you knew that you could always go back to first base, would you always steal second? And the answer is yes. And guess what? We can always go back to first base. Yeah. And I think we ought to just continue to steal second.
I love that. I love that. And, you know, it's great to put everything into perspective. You know, right now I have a lot going on, you know, personally in terms of, you know, we're moving and renovations, and you should see my setup right now where I'm recording this. So if the audio is not so great, I apologize to folks, but it's not where I usually record, let's just say. And it's frustrating, but I keep reminding myself, this is such a privilege of again, quote unquote problem to have, you know, that it's a slight inconvenience. And I think the fact that so many of us are able to have the opportunity to create businesses that we actually want is such a privilege, because I look back at, you know, a lot of my friends and our parents, you know, they immigrated into this country and they had to go to work at a place where they didn't want, or they had to start a business because it was a means of like survival. Like they didn't have the luxury of sitting around and thinking about, well, what do I really want to do in life, you know?
No,
and so, yeah.
It was a necessity. The options weren't there and the barriers were too high.
The risk was too high. And, you know, sometimes you just need that dose of reality checks. Like, okay, seriously, like we've got it good. And yeah, there are things that disappoint us or whatever. But all in all, we are so privileged in this day and time. And I think that immediately is like my reboot, you know, when that operating system, it's like, okay, let's reboot. We're good. You know,
yeah.
let's keep things in perspective. So with that said, again, thank you so much, Mel, for being here. We're gonna have you on because, like I said, we haven't even touched the surface on all the great things you can talk about and share. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to share with folks on the show? You know, any kind of resources or content that you think people might benefit from?
Well, I think that one of the places, if they're really trying to position themselves as an influencer, as a market leader, I've got a ton of free resources. If they just went to, thoughtpreneuracademy.com or melabraham.com, they can get access to that. Always glad to help. For me, really my mission is part of the mission is really to allow people to see possibility in their lives again. And I think that our society is suffering from not seeing that. And if we can shine even a dim light on it again and get it dusted off, then I think we're serving. And it's a blessing for me to be on this journey with you and to share with your audience and share time with you.
Thank you so much, Mel. So what'd you think? It was a good conversation, right? I'd love to know what your biggest takeaway was from my conversation with Mel. So if you're on Instagram, head on over there, find me at Annette Stepanian, and let me know in the comments what was your biggest lesson learned. Now remember, you can learn more about Mel over at melabraham.com, or you can always find all the good details over in the show notes, which is available at AnnetteStepanian.com/office talk. Okay, my friend, that's all I have for you this week, but make sure to tune back in next week because I have a little surprise announcement that I want to share with you. So make sure to subscribe if you already aren't a subscriber so that you don't miss that episode. I hope you have a fantastic week ahead, and I can't wait to talk to you later. Does this sound familiar? You've got this great business idea. Maybe you want to work with savvy clients, helping them with your unique skills and talents. Or perhaps you want to open the virtual doors to your online store. Whatever your chosen path, as you start your business, you quickly realize that there's quite a learning curve when it comes to being your own girl boss. And you wonder, if only someone showed me what to do step by step to get my business up and running. Well, my dear, your wish has been granted. It's time to get down to business. Let's Get Down to Business is an online training I created to walk you through step by step how to get your business started from the legal perspective. No more thinking, I don't know what I don't know. Head on over to yourlegalbff.com and check out Let's Get Down to Business. and let's get your dream business up and running the legal way.